Hebrews 13:8. It's one of the other scriptures for this week. It's not really part of my message, but there's lore and mythology attached to it in my family. A member of the Edwards family, who shall remain nameless because I didn't think to get permission to share, was on a line crew for the phone company back in the day. At their boarding house, his buddy would reverently offer a blessing before every meal. Hebrews 13:8. The matron of the house thought he was devoted and pious until she looked it up and realized every day he looked at her cooking and said, "Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever." On with this week's gospel scripture. It's from Luke 14, verses 1 and then verses 7 through 14. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host, who invited both of you, may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then, in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they might invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. You will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The reading of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I invite you to think back to a time when airline ticket agents checked you in at the counter and weren't so stressed by anxious and obnoxious travelers that they had time to help you out if it was within their power. You know, a golden era of a couple of years ago. 3 or 4 years ago now, I guess, to before the pandemic. Maybe longer ago now that I think about it. But if you weren't a frequent flyer, you've probably seen the scene in a movie or on TV. The smiling gate agent or flight attendant says, "You know what? First class isn't that full. How about we upgrade you?" If it ever happens to you, it's tough not to feel special. Like you earned it, and they're just now realizing how special you are. I've never had it happen to me, but my guide dogs have. And I, of course, got to go with them. A bit of explanation. On flights, guide dogs get to ride at their person's feet. They tuck surprisingly well into the spot under the seat in front of you. I do think it would be funny to open up one of the overhead luggage bins and have a pup looking down at you. Hello? But alas, something about regulation says no, under the seat in front of you. My first guide dog, Leroy, was the master. It didn't happen all the time, but he got me bumped a few times. Would your dog be more comfortable up in first class? Why, yes, he would. What's that, Leroy? You want me to have your complimentary champagne? A particular flight from Toronto to Newark was delayed because the first class cabin crew was busy giving Leroy pats and belly rubs, and the pilot had to make his announcement 3 times before they noticed. Ah, yes, the upgrades. I'd love to say it was my charm, but it was the dog. In our gospel scripture this week, we've got a parable, a teaching of Jesus that is all about upgrades and downgrades on the seating chart. I'll set it up for you and then we'll dig into the teaching. This occurrence took place within a culture of status and reciprocity. Who invited whom, where you sat, where you were assigned to sit. Imagine one of those Regency period dramas, or even if you had to plan the seating chart for guests at a wedding. I was a groomsman for a friend and was all, just sit people wherever. Don't make such a big deal about this. Then we planned our wedding. Maybe plan isn't the right term for my role, had my input tolerated. One thing to note, you may have noticed we skipped over a few verses. There isn't anything sketchy here. It's just pretty much a repeat of last week's message. Jesus asking if it's right to heal on the Sabbath. We still get Jesus tangling with the Pharisees. You'd think they would know to stop inviting him to stuff on the Sabbath. It just turns them into object lessons. In this case, it is about how they chose their seats. There could be an element of wanting to sit at the cool kids table, but looking at the status ranking of the day, it's more likely Jesus was concerned with the social order and an economy of reciprocity. Give and take and political quid pro quo. That's Latin for what's this going to cost me? Yeah, when Jesus told this parable about the seating chart, this example exaggerated for teaching effect, he tells the gathered not to take the high and mighty position because someone more honored than you might come along. This has interesting implications both in earthly terms. You don't want to cause a scene. Wouldn't it be better to start low and get the upgrade? But also, who is the most honored guest at this particular dinner gathering? If you just said Jesus, you got it. Jesus looks at all the jockeying for position, and he basically does a throwdown. I'm here, and I'm God. I am the most honored in your midst, and I refute your economy of reciprocity and favor. I humble myself, even to death on the cross, and I have the greatest status of all. I humble myself and will be elevated. Jesus did this on occasion, a bit of a flex while he was teaching. I'm God. This is how I behave and engage. Do you catch my meaning? There's a pivot in the next section. Jesus is no longer using a parable. He's speaking directly to his host. It's likely the host receives some status by inviting the popular rabbi. Like, if you came to my house because I invited... I'm trying to think of a relevant yet non-controversial celebrity. Okay, choose from the following list or insert your own. If you came to my house because I invited Wayne Gretzky, or the Dalai Lama, or Dolly Parton, or Prime Minister Jacinda of New Zealand, or Lin-Manuel Miranda from Hamilton, just pick your favorite celebrity you'd want to come to my house if that celebrity was there. Anyways, you might be there just because the celebrity was there, and I might gain some status if I hosted a dinner at which you could meet that celebrity. You would think I'm pretty cool. I could dine out on that for a while. Even if you don't know or care about the celebrity, you would get to tell people you met somebody. Jesus turns from parables for everyone and speaks directly to his host. But, as always, it is a lesson for everyone to hear, the people in the room and down through the ages to us. He is working to upset this economy of reciprocity and attention with one of humility and generosity. It's not the humble brag or virtue brag of, well, sorry I'm late. I, of course, drove the most fuel-efficient route. Oh, really? Well, sorry, I'm a bit sweaty. I rode my bike. Oh, is your bike made of sustainably sourced bamboo and vegan paste? It's not about a status of deprivation. It's not about status at all. In the parable, Jesus uses the example of taking the lowest seat, but even if you know you deserve a higher seat. But in the practical wisdom he gives to the host and to us, he says to set aside the status rules, whatever they are. He says to change things up by not inviting those who can repay you, because in that reciprocity, you would receive the totality of your reward. Jesus knew his host wouldn't be perfect. He knows we won't be perfect, but calls us to set this as an ideal, something you want to live into, a true spirit of generosity. He wants us to spend more time trying to live into it than in trying to figure out precisely what it means and whether or not somebody else is following what you think the rules are. Does this mean we shouldn't ever invite people who could repay us by inviting us back? That we shouldn't ever invite our family? Well, of course not. But it is a call to realign your goals with those of Jesus, to step outside that economy that asks, well, what's in it for me? What's this going to cost me? And to remember who the truly honored guest is, who the real celebrity is. One more story of Leroy getting me an upgrade. If you're thinking, wow, this guy with a disability sure is lucky. I invite you to revisit the stories of Jesus healing and curing and my message from last week. If I occasionally get a perk, like taking a dog with me into a restaurant or get to skip some of the lines at an amusement park, think of it as just a glimpse of grace. Anyways, we had tickets to a concert in New York City. One of our favorite Canadian bands, Great Big Sea, was in town at the old Hammerstein Ballroom. The whole place was general admission, just an open dance floor. Eileen and I showed up with our oldest, Brian, who's then a teenager, and of course, Leroy. We went up to the bouncer and asked if I could get in ahead of time to scout out a spot for Leroy. The bouncer got a manager. The manager got a supervisor who said, well, this won't do. I was getting ready for yet another fight about access and the rights of service dogs. Come this way. Watch your step. Up here, sir. Take these seats. I'll let everyone know you're supposed to be here. Okay. Hey, Eileen, where have they put us? Is this okay? Yup. They appear to have put us on the stage. Oh, okay. Wait, what? Yeah, that railing in front of you, Ian, don't reach too far over it. You might knock over a guitar. Okay, keeping in mind, we had cheap general admission tickets, pastor salaries and all, and we were in the VIPest of VIP seats. There was even a security person at the bottom of the steps we had gone up just to make sure nobody else came into our section. Did I have an extra special experience? We could smell the rosin smoking during the intense Celtic fiddle solos. That's how close we were. So, yup. We didn't earn this. We didn't pay for it. We just received an unexpected gift. Kind of the definition of grace. Leroy was a couple of dogs ago, and in the way of things, he's gone now. I'm between dogs now and waiting to get a bit settled after moving. But if the next dog gets me an occasional upgrade, I'll take it. I can't repay it. It's not like I can invite the crew to my first class next time. Just as I can't repay Jesus for salvation by grace and empowerment through the Spirit. I know to be a gracious recipient and know that I'm not just privileged or entitled. I am loved by God. How can I repay it? What does the Lord require of us as His followers, as His apostolic gospel-sharing church? To insert the words of the prophet Jesus came to fulfill, to seek justice for those who also can't repay it, to love, to be kind to those who won't necessarily reciprocate, and walk humbly with our God, humbly in a place of service along Jesus and fulfilling the movement of the Spirit.